This time in the Prop Master. Well, with the idea of shooting shorter videos that come out more often, I decided just to deal with installing these pieces here. This is the Beacon and whatever this is. These are just the two little greeblies that sit on the top of the main body of the jetpack. But just installing them was a really short video, so I decided to go ahead and make some versions of these from scratch. And also then I realized that in Empire Strikes Back, the Beacon's got a light in it. So of course I had to set that up for a light. And now the video's an hour and a half long. I can't help it. So I guess I'm just destined to make long videos, but I am working on it, and hopefully soon I'll be able to make some short videos that come out more often. I promise. Also, if you're one of those people that were asking me when I first started this project if I was going to wire it up for lighting, well, there's your answer. This has been a really busy time of the year. Both of my kids are getting ready to go into their first semester of college. So that's been a little stressful and kind of busy. Also, I finally have lost enough weight to fit back into the Boba Fett costume. So I took it out for its first con last week. And if you were one of the people that were at Dallas Fan Expo on Sunday and you came up and asked for a photo or just to say hi, thank you very much. That really does make the whole experience of a con so much better. Really enjoyed it. On another note, like always, please interact with these videos as much as possible. I'm still trying to maintain a level above being completely disappearing from YouTube. So, please keep that up. Interact with the video however you can. And I know I said that, I was trying to keep this short, but there's still, like I said, quite a lot to do. So with that in mind, let's get to work. Okay, so we're really coming down to where there's just two more things that we need to actually make to put on the jetpack. Everything else is just a couple of pieces of touching up some stuff that's on the jetpack already, and then prepping it for paint. What we have here, I've seen called several different things. I've seen this thing called a stabilizing gyro. I've also seen it referred to as the Beacon, which I think probably makes more sense because I've seen it, especially in Empire Strikes Back. It's got a light in it that's lit up. It doesn't actually light up in Return of the Jedi, but that might just be because he was outside. I don't know. This has been, the only thing I can really find this being called is the Missile Targeting Rangefinder, which I think someone was just trying to diagram things and had a list of technical names and just didn't know where else to put that, because I don't see how that is possibly, a rangefinder. But anyway, I believe this goes on the, if you're looking at the jetpack from the back, this is on the right side and this is on the left side. And I bought both of these on Etsy. There's a dozen of them. I don't want to give you a specific builder because there's so many different people making these. In fact, there's a beautiful pair of that's made from aluminum and brass, it looks like, that I would have bought, except for I already had these. Now, if you don't want to buy these, I'm going to show you how you can make some. And let's start out with this mysterious thing that is definitely not a rangefinder. And it was pretty simple. In fact, I can just kind of show you this right now. If you start out with a 9/32 aluminum tube that you can get at the hardware store, you can't really find it at Home Depot or Lowe's, but at your basic, True Value or Ace hardware store that sells the little brass and aluminum fittings. They have rods and tubes and things like that. You can find these, and it's just a 9/32, which is about 7 millimeters, aluminum tube. It comes in about maybe a little over a foot length. So if you cut that at 1.5 inches, which is about 38 millimeters, you'll have this tube here. And then from there, we have 2 washers that are 1/4 inch washers by 1 inch, which means that the center is 1/4 inch little hole, although it's really a lot closer. In fact, I think it's almost exactly 9/32 of an inch, which works perfectly with our 9/32 of an inch tube. So metric, if you find that, technically it would be 6 millimeters, but if there's a 7 millimeter, and that's the size that you have for a washer, then I would go with that. Basically, get whatever size tube is going to fit snugly in your washers. When you get your fender washers, if they're a little bit big, then I would just suggest when you put this whole thing together, you can kind of put this piece on and then just slide these over the top and glue them down to the bottom, or to the top of the jetpack. Oh, and the last piece, and there's 2 of those, by the way. And then the last piece is this, which just fits in there. And that is an M5 socket cup screw. It's 5 millimeters, 0.8 by 30 millimeters. Now the 30 millimeters is going to be the length. And by the way, I'm doing all this in metric because I've never found any of these type of screw heads that were not metric. I'm trying to get that to focus, but it's not playing along. Anyway, I've only found these screws in metric sizes, so I'm giving everything in metric sizes. But if you look it up at, say, Home Depot, it is an M5 socket cup screw, 0.8 by 30 millimeters. Now the 0.8 I don't think matters because I'm pretty sure that's going to be the threads, and we're not actually using the threads at all for this. But those are your parts, and that's essentially how we're, when we actually put this on, we have a little bit there at the bottom to fit down into a hole that we're going to drill. And we've got our 2 washers. I think we'll probably fill this with a little bit of hot glue and then just drop that into it to hold everything snug. Now, as for this part here, you notice we don't have one of those made yet because it's going to be a little bit, I actually am going to have to make that out of wood. So we can go ahead and start working on that. I consider this pretty much finished until we actually put it onto the jetpack, and then I can show you how to attach it. By the way, if you do want to purchase these from Etsy, you're still going to want to use the 9/32 of an inch aluminum tube, because we're going to cut some of this and use it to attach this onto the jetpack. So to make one of these, the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to take a 7/8 of an inch or 22 millimeter hole saw, and I have a piece of a 2x4. This is this kind of 2x4 that I had before that have these deep round corners here. So I just cut, those parts off so that it's more of a square. As long as this piece is 3 inches or larger, you'll be fine. Now, it's worth saying that this actually cannot cut all the way through this piece of wood. So I'm going to start this, and I'm going to go down as far as I can, and then I'm going to use the existing center hole and my hand drill to finish drilling a 1/4 inch hole through this whole piece, and then I'm going to come in from the other side and drill up. Okay, so I've cut into this my full 2 inches that I can go on the drill press. Now, using just a hand drill and a bit that will go through, I repeat, that will go through, I'm just going to use this as a guide. Okay, now using this hole as a guide, I'm going to go ahead and come in from this side with the hole saw to connect up with this. Okay, so here's my piece all cut out. You can, if you look really close, you can see a little bit of a line right there. That's where the 2 pieces met in the middle. But it feels quite smooth, and plus we're going to do some sanding This should take care of that. And the hole goes all the way through. And I've got a piece of 1/4-inch dowel that matches the 1/4-inch hole drilled by the hole saw, or the sort of the pilot hole. Now notice this is a little bit taller. I want this to be longer so that I can chuck this into my drill afterwards. And I've just got to glue this into that. And I'm going to use some wood glue for that. Now I'm using wood glue on this because you could use super glue, but I was afraid it was going to get glued in place before I could get this all the way in because it's a reasonably tight fit. So I'd rather get some glue that's going to work like a lubricant first. And I'm going to make a mess here, so I just want to make sure that there's a good coating on all sides. And I should probably get this a bit of a coating as well. Not there yet. Have enough. Put a little bit more into it than I was expecting. Okay, that's good enough right there. Just gonna clean up some of the extra here. Okay, now I'm gonna go ahead and let this dry overnight. In truth, if you're going to do a lot of heavy work to it, then you should give it a full 24 hours, but I think there's so much friction in there that 12 hours will be plenty, and I'll be able to put this in the drill and then shape this to the right shape. So I'll see you in 24 hours, or 12. Okay, it's the next morning. Let's take a look at this. Okay, I'm pretty sure that's all one piece now. Now I will say this. There's a lot of very coarse grain in this, as you can see. And that could come back in the end to show a lot of this grain. So what you can do if you want to make your life a little bit easier is instead of cutting this out of a piece of 2x4, if you took, if you bought a sheet of 1/2-inch MDF, which is medium density fiberboard. It's just a particle board. But if you took a sheet of that and then cut it up into 6 pieces, glued all those together, you don't need a very big piece, obviously. And then use that as your piece of wood that you cut this out of with a hole saw, then you'd have a piece like this that didn't have any grain pattern to it, at all. Now I'm going to take my drill and I'm going to go ahead and put this in, using this little piece of dowel sticking out. And I want to go ahead and make some marks on here. So the first measurement I'm going to mark on here is from right here. I'm going to mark out 5/8 of an inch. That's about 16 millimeters. And by kind of lining this up, and then I can make a nice mark. Our next measurement is going to be at 1.5 inches or 38 millimeters. And once again, I'm going to put my sort of the weight of my hand on the part of the drill that's not spinning. And then I can hold this in one spot. It'd be easier if it goes the other direction. My next measurement is going to be at 2 1/16 of an inch or 52 millimeters. Just a little bar. And finally, my last measurement is 2 3/4 of an inch or 7 centimeters. So the first thing we're going to do with these is this last measurement here, that's actually the height of the whole thing. So let's go ahead and chop this little bit off the end. So that's taken care of, but now we have to make one last little mark. Let's go ahead and put this back in the drill. Let's see if I can do something with that. Okay, so now we just want to measure in 1/8 of an inch, or about 3.5 millimeters. To move this so that I can kind of get into a position where I can do this. So that's going to show where our sort of the very top of this gets smaller as it goes up. So that'll be our measurement for that. Now, using the drill, you can definitely take a sanding stick and get this spinning, and then you can shape it with the sanding stick. But that does take quite a while. I'm going to go over to the belt sander and see if we can't speed this up a little bit. Okay, so I'm just going to use the belt sander to put a little bit of a curve between these two lines here. Don't want to make a huge recess here, but enough that it's noticeable. Okay, we're getting there, but we're not there yet. Let's make that a little bit more pronounced. Okay, that's looking better. I'm gonna go compare this to the actual piece, or the piece that I bought, and we'll take a look at it. Okay, this is looking pretty good. I did notice that the last time I checked this in here, I got it a little bit crooked. So my cutout here is a little bit crooked. I mean, it's a little bit not centered. It kind of wobbles around a little bit. So be careful. Make sure that when you chuck it in here to check it, and make sure that this end is not moving at all. I could fix this and make it, symmetrical. However, it's going to make it super thin, so I'm not going to do that. Just make sure that you don't, do what I did and make this. Don't try to do this while this end is wobbling around. Make sure it's in there nice and straight. So now what we have to do is connect this line with this line on the end. And you've seen me do that kind of thing 100 times, but we'll do it one more. When we do this, this is the direction that this turns. So we want to make sure that this is spinning in the opposite direction, as opposed to, if you're going this direction, we wouldn't actually be sanding anything because we're kind of going the same direction. So as you can see, we are almost through this line here, but we're nowhere near this one. So I really want to change this angle a lot flatter. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, so comparing this one to this one, it's not bad, but there are some issues. Obviously, one of the biggest ones is where I put this in the chuck of the drill crooked, so it's this sort of skinnier area here is not centered. The other one is this is too short at the top, and I think what I did was I took this measurement and subtracted it from this measurement, but then I forgot to take that answer and divide it in half. So that's why I took away too much at the top. So it really should be not an 1/8 of an inch, but a 1/16 of an inch in from the edge, or about 2 millimeters. So I'm going to do this whole thing over again real quick, but I'm going to do all of the things that I said that we should have done the first time, to make this better. And we'll take a look at that real quick. Okay, so this did not go as smoothly as I'd hoped. So I took 4 3/4 inch pieces of MDF, glued them together, and then after about 3 hours, I tried to drill it out, and it snapped off right at the first glue joint. So I waited the entire 24 hours to make sure that the glue was, really well cured. And even going extremely slowly, I'm afraid that this shape is just too tall and skinny for the strength of the particle board to withstand. So I tried several times here, going really slowly. I'd go down 1/8 of an inch over about 30 seconds, and then clean off the teeth, blow everything out, go down another 1/8 of an inch. And no matter what I did, I couldn't get a whole piece out. They just shear off. So I abandoned that whole concept. The particle board is just not strong enough. So I decided to just go with a finer grained wood, and I did some things differently. Here it is right here. I'm actually very pleased with the way this turned out. Like I said, I did some things differently, as you can see there. I started out with a 1/4 inch aluminum rod that was cut out just slightly bigger than 3 inches. And the first thing I did was I rounded off this end. For one thing, that'll make it easier to go through the hole, but also it acts as this little round cap piece that's actually on the end of this. So I started out by doing that. Then I cut out this cylinder the same way as I did with the, this piece here. Then I put the aluminum piece in, but I didn't go all the way to the end because I needed to, make this the right length. So once I cut this to the right length, then I tapped this to the point where it's just the cap end sticking out slightly. This does not have any glue on it at all. It's snug enough with the aluminum that it doesn't need to be glued. And then I shaped it the same way as I did over there. The only difference was I had a little bit of the same issue here, where this curve is larger in some areas and smaller in others. But I didn't go in super deep, so I made sure that it didn't go beyond this line. And then with this in the drill, I just took a sanding stick and ran this at the highest speed, and then came in at an angle here and just came down like that. Let me get this reading so maybe see a little better. Came in at an angle here and just smoothed out this transition on the very ends until it was precisely where I wanted it to be. You're going slow enough with this version, with just using a sanding stick and the drill, that you have a lot of control there, and I was able to make this much smoother. So I'm actually quite happy with the way this turned out. Now, you don't need to go buy mahogany to do this, but if you go to one of the big box stores like Home Depot or Lowe's, they have a section, sort of a wood section that's specialty, and you can find oak there. Anything that's going to be, a finer grain than this is going to, work out better. And you can generally buy pieces of oak in sort of a 2x2 size that's, I think you can actually get it as short as 2 feet long. That's not what this is, but this is roughly the same shape. It's just mahogany instead of oak. And if you use that, you can get right back to this where we have here. It also gives me the advantage of having the aluminum so that you don't crush this little wooden dowel when you're trying to put it in the drill. So now that we kind of have a basic understanding of these, let's go ahead and deal with these. Actually, this one I don't need to do anything to it other than paint it. So we'll leave that there. This one I've got a couple things I want to do to it because we're going to wire this one to light up. So we go ahead and start on that. Okay, if you want to put a light in this piece, you're going to have to buy a Beacon that is made to have a light in it. More importantly, that it has a hole that goes through the shaft and that this top piece comes off. That was not something that I was looking for when I bought this, but I suspect that most of them are going to have that feature because of the Empire Strikes Back version does have a light in it. So this one has a 9/32 of an inch hole running through it. That's just a tad over 7 millimeters. But whatever size hole yours has, you're going to want to find a small tube that is that size. And then in this case, I was having a really hard time finding just LEDs somewhere that I could buy. We used to have a Fry's Electronics here where you could just go buy individual components and things like that would be great. We don't have that anymore, and I was having a hard time finding them. So I finally went on Amazon and found one. I'll post where I got this on the info section of the video. But this came from Amazon, and this was less than $10. And it comes with quite a bit. It comes with green LEDs, white LEDs, yellow, blue, and red, as well as some holders, which we're not going to need, a switch, and some connections for a 9-volt battery. And I mean, I'm making mine as more like the Return of the Jedi version. Actually, it's sort of in between the two movies because I've got some parts from Empire Strikes Back and some parts from Return of the Jedi. So I'm from a time period in between the two movies, I guess. In Empire Strikes Back, it is definitely a white light that is in the beacon. It's not lit up at all in Return of the Jedi, so technically I guess I could use any color that I wanted to. But I guess I should probably go with white just to keep things, the same. Although I really want to go with blue, to be honest, or green. Green would fit color-wise with the jetpack better. I think blue, I like the looks of it. I'm torn. I may just go with white. But the problem is when you pull one of these out of here, let's pull a white one out. This is much larger than I was expecting. I was expecting something probably 50% this size, and it was not going to fit up in this part. So the first thing I had to do was to drill out this to a larger size. And to do that, unfortunately I can't show you this stuff because I only have one of these and I had to experiment to see what was going to work. So much like we did in the previous video when we were trying to drill precise holes using the drill press, I used the same procedure for that. I took a piece of wood and I clamped that down in the drill press, and I drilled a 7/32 of an inch, not a whole hole, but just drilled down a little bit. And that is the size of this little bump that's in the top of this. And I just wanted to be able to, lay this flush and in a way that it would make sure that it stayed perfectly centered with the drill press. Now you can do this with a hand drill. It's just not going to be as precise, and you'll have to be very careful when you're doing it. But this is, not the toughest plastic in the world. It's a little bit fragile, and I need to drill this hole out to be 3/8 of an inch, which is about, in fact, it is 9.5 millimeters. And if I just try to drill that into that size, it would probably just break this piece into little pieces. So I actually went step by step, starting with 9/32. Now, when I explain how I did this is going to show you how messed up the imperial standards that we use in our sizing. It's just crazy. Versus, in millimeters, I would probably be doing, 4 millimeters and 5 millimeters and 6 millimeters and 7 millimeters. Instead, I started out with 9/32 of an inch and drilled that out. And then I switched over to a 19/64 bit and drilled that out, and then a 5/16 drill bit, and then a 21/64 drill bit, and then I drilled with a 11/32, and then a 23/64, and then finally a 3/8 of an inch drill bit. And several times some things inside of this broke, and I had to pull them out with some tweezers. Structurally, everything still seems to be in good shape. I'm not sure exactly what was in there. Probably something that was designed to hold a standard sized LED, but that was destroyed and I had to retrieve that. But this, I finally did get this to be the right size. Now I also was trying to see about how I could paint this, and I did paint the inside of this silver already. So you'll probably want to do that as well before you start putting the LED in here, because once you do that, you're not going to be able to have access to it anymore. So drill that out, then you can paint that silver on the inside, and then you can take your LED and this will fit in there now. The problem is there's a little lip that goes all the way, not all the way, but it kind of sticks out around the very bottom of this piece. I don't know if I can get that where you can see that or not. Probably not. So now I'll just take a sanding stick and you just want to sand this little tiny lip off all the way around. And basically you can just kind of feel with your finger, if you feel a little bit of a lip sticking out, then go ahead and sand that area. Okay, that feels pretty good. And once you get that sanded all the way around, just want to make sure that this will fit in here, and it does, no problem. So that takes care of that part. Now we just need to take our little tube here and we need to glue this in here and then make sure that we have, you know, maybe a centimeter or, you know, a half of an inch sticking down that we can use to attach this to the jetpack. And I think probably you could use hot glue, you could use whatever, you know, I'm going to use super glue on this, I think. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to take this and I'm going to cut off a 2-inch section of it, or about 5.8 millimeter or 5.8 centimeters, and I'll be right back. Okay, I just cut that off using a little hand hacksaw. Took about 5 strokes. It's aluminum's pretty soft stuff. And I'm just going to take some of my super glue here. Let me shake this up first. This is the bottom part of this piece. And I'm just going to put some super glue all the way around. Slide this in. I'm going to leave out just a little bit there. And I'm going to hit it with some zip kicker. Now there's a good chance that there's a little bit of super glue in there that's going to try to clog that up a little bit, but I can take that out with a file very easily. Okay, that's on there permanently. Now I've decided that I'm not going to decide yet what color I want to put in here. I'm going to go ahead and start out with white. I don't have to make that decision until the very end when I decide to glue this top on. So why don't y'all let me know what y'all think in the comments section as to what color you think I should use. Mostly between white, blue, or green. I'm trying to think how I want to wire this up. Do I want to? I have to decide where to put the plug. I mean the switch. The plug will actually go in the back. I'll just cut the section out of the back. Well, you'll see that. So I'm going to go look and see where I want to put this button, and then I'll be right back. Okay, so I can't actually do the full installation of the beacon light on this today because I'm waiting for a part to be delivered. It was supposed to be delivered already, but now they're saying it's going to be delivered tomorrow. So while we're waiting for that, let's go ahead and get things set up where we can actually mount the beacon and then put the switch on the back. I'm waiting for a little box that I can mount the battery in that will open and close to make that a nice flat. It'll be nice and flat on the back, plus the battery will be safe and not fall out. And don't worry, it's also under $10. So let's go ahead and work on the placement of the beacon itself. What I want to do here is I want to, across here, I'm going to line it up with this, if you can see this piece right here, where that angle changes right there on that corner. We wanted to line it up with that corner, which in my case is pretty much with this, the left edge of this, what they call a piano key or a dental. So using my ruler, I can go ahead and line this up with that, using the flat end of the ruler as sort of a square. And I'm going to mark a line. And then I want to make this not the middle here, but a little bit toward the back. Although this is a difficult decision as far as the placement of it, because the photographs I'm seeing are difficult to make out as to whether or not it's, I've seen some where it's further back than the middle, some where it's in the middle, and I'm not really sure. I haven't actually found any good information as far as the measurements for the placement of this. So I'm gonna sort of decide on what I think looks good. And I'm going back and forth between centering this with this piece and making it a little bit further back. So if I center this is 3.5 inches, so that would be 1 3/4 of an inch, which would be right here. But making it 1 1/4 from the, or maybe even like 1 from the back. This is probably a pretty good time to use the piece that was messed up. I just cut the stick off the bottom. I just have to decide whether or not I like it better there, or if I like it better there. Part of me likes it better here, and part of me likes it better there. This almost feels a little too far out. What if I split the difference and put it here? I like that because it kind of lines up with this all the way across. So that the top of this, if you drew a line between there and there, this would line up in that. So I kind of like that. So I'm going to split the difference. So in this case, that is sort of 1 3. What do we got? 1/2 3/4. So 1 3/8. And I'm going to stick with that. That's about 35 millimeters, by the way. From all the guessing and everything that I've been doing, it's going to be pretty obvious that this is not going to pass inspection by the 501st or the Mandalorian Mercs or something like that for trooping as Boba Fett. I think if that's the route you want to go, then you're really going to have to go hang out with them and, let them help you build your costume. Because I definitely don't have access to any of the real props or measurements or anything like that, and they're not on the internet anymore, so there's a lot of guesswork going on here. So I'm going to take a punch, and I'm just going to line that up as close as I can. I just want to hit that well enough that my drill bit's not going to move around too much. Now I want to drill a hole as square as I can, but there's no way I can use the drill press for this. So what I've done is I've taken this drill bit, the one that matches your tubing, which in my case is 9/32 of an inch, but you want to use whatever size tubing you use that size drill bit. And I've gone to the drill press and I have taken a block and I've drilled a hole straight through it. Now, the top may not be the right angle, but the important thing is the bottom is going to be flat and the hole should be 90 degrees to the bottom. And I measured the angles and everything just to make sure that everything was square on the drill press. Now I've got the drill bit sticking through a little bit. I'm going to use that to line everything up. Now I'm going to push this down flat and use this to guide my angle. And I'm just going to drill all the way in. Now with any luck, I can kind of continue that direction here. It looks a little like the bit, like the drill hit something and kind of moved a little bit, but we'll see what happens. Okay, let's see how this fits. Okay. Actually, it's got a little bit of movement, but that's okay. Now I'm going to repeat that process on this side over here. I'm just going to do the exact same thing, but opposite. But I'm going to do that off camera so that I can actually see what I'm doing. So now that we've got that out of the way, we need to figure out a way to mount this switch. Now we could just mount this to the back somewhere. It's got to be low enough that it goes into the cavity here and not showing on the other side. But if we have it right here, it's going to be constantly turning on and off depending on how my back hits it. So we need to recess into here to put this in place. So you obviously want to make it as small a hole as possible, because the smaller the hole, the least likely, or the less likely there's something to get in there to turn the button on and off. So I just been walking through the house trying to find things that I could use, preferably round, because it's going to be easier to cut the right size into the back. And also carrying around several of my hole saws until I finally came across a lid and a hole saw that were the exact same size. And that's how I determined how big this hole was going to be. I would have liked to have something smaller than this. However, I just didn't have anything that was smaller that also lined up with the hole saw. So we're going with this. And this is just the lid off of some vitamins. Now we want this to, well, as it turns out, I just checked, the hole for the beacon is far enough back that it goes into the foam and not into the sort of the large pieces that are in the front, which is what I thought it was going to do. So that makes things a little bit easier. If that hole had gone into the solid pieces that are in the front, then we would have had to try to make sure we lined up and drill a hole directly back in to intercept that hole. But since we didn't, we've got a lot more leeway. Basically, the only thing we have to worry about here is that we want to make sure that this isn't so low that the wires don't reach it. And I'm not terribly worried about that. I think this pretty much lines up with where the hole is, and just a little bit lower than that to make sure that I've got plenty of clearance with the top. And I'm going to put this right about here. I'm not going to tell you what size hole saw this is, because you just need to make sure that it matches up, with the lid that you pick. Like I said, I just picked a lid because a circle is a lot easier to cut the hole for. There's actually quite a large cavity there, considering it's supposed to be full of foam. I think before I finish with this, I'm going to revisit the spray foam and see if I can't fill that cavity, because I don't feel any foam anywhere. And that's only maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches at most, and that foam was supposed to be able to fill gaps more than that. So I'm a little confused by that. I really kind of want there to be something backing this up when I put this in there, so that at some point I don't push too hard and this come through and fall like that. I'll be back after I throw a temper tantrum and then try to figure out how to fish that out of there. Actually, that came out really easy. I just turned this upside down until it slid to where I could see it. And I reached in with these, which is like a fisherman's hook puller, which really comes in handy for that kind of stuff, and was able to grab it, pull it out. Now we just need to cut a square hole into this it's the right size to fit this. In this case, the dimensions of this, and you don't want these dimensions, you want the dimensions of this piece that sticks through. So not the cover, but the actual part where the wires connect. And I'm going with millimeters just because they're a little bit more precise, and we're not going to end up with 32 164ths or something like that. So this is 11.5 millimeters wide by 19 millimeters tall, if you want to go that direction. And I've got those drawn on here. They don't have to be precise because when I cut this out, that's not going to be precise. But if you're going to err one way or the other, err slightly small so that you can sand, the hole a little bit bigger. Now, in my opinion, if you're going to sell a switch like this, you really need to add a little template to go along with it, but that's just me. So now we just have to cut this out, and I'm just going to use an X-Acto knife. Now I'm just going to use this because there's got some holes there, and when I use this, hopefully I won't just I'll have a little bit more room for the blade to go through without just jamming into something. If I did it flat here, I'd be constantly just stabbing into this top. I'm going to use this old X-Acto blade that's a bit rusted. Hopefully my fingers will be out of the way. If you had the normal blade for this red-handled X-Acto that's a little bit more shallow, like it's a lot more shallow, that would probably be a better choice. But this is what I've got, and this is what I'm going to use. Now, when I did this, all I did was I measured here 11.5 millimeters, and I did the same thing over here. And then I connected the lines, and they were reasonably close to the middle. So then I just drew a line using my ruler as kind of a, a square, like that, and then measured, from that first line to 19 millimeters and did it again. Like I said, this does not have to be, precise. It just has to be sort of pretty close to it, because I'm sure mess it up when I'm cutting this out. See, now I'm making it too big. Let's switch sides and see if I can't keep it between the lines. Not sure why everything that makes a lot of noise has to be going by my house right when I'm trying to film. I want to try to keep it inside the lines because I want this to be strong enough that it's not going to bend everywhere when I'm trying to turn the switch on and off. So if I overcut these lines, it's going to definitely weaken the mounting. Got a little bit wide there, so I'm going to start on this side and come back to it. That should be connected. I'm not sure why it's not. Now let's see if we're lucky and this just snaps in place. I really didn't expect to be that lucky, but you never know. Oh, great. It did snap. It did snap into place, but it's on the wrong side. Think before you act. Okay, now we have a nice little recessed area for our button. You can go right in here. That should keep it out of the way. Okay, now I have my piece with the LED back in place, and I'm going to feed it down into the hole. Hopefully in your case, when you do this, there'll be a whole lot of foam there that you're going to have to carve out with a knife. So we know the wires are long enough. And I think we'll put the battery pack right in here somewhere, or we could put it below it. Doesn't really matter, whatever we decide to works better. But I can't do that until we get the battery box. Okay, look what finally came in. So this is the battery box that I've bought. You don't have to use this one, but I'll put a link to this one down in the info. There are some that Well, let me just show you. This one opens up like this. And as you can see, it's got a hole in there. It'll work absolutely fine with this type of connector. It just slides in from the back. So you hook that on the battery, the whole thing goes in here, it closes up flat. It'd be perfect. There are some that replaces this piece basically, where it's all wired up, and when you put it in here, it automatically locks in place, or connects the battery. Either way works. So the first thing I'm going to do is I've got my triangle here. You can use a square if you want. You could use a piece of cardboard that has, that is a square. It has 90-degree angles, whatever. And for that matter, it's really not even that critical that this be perfectly straight up and down. It might even be more aesthetically pleasing to just measure out from whatever this edge is here. I just remember that we stuck this on here without making sure that it was square. Not that that really matters. Either way, I'm going to use my triangle and I'm going to line up this straight edge. And then I'm going to draw a line. And I'm going to use that as my first line for cutting this out. In this case, mine is 15/16 by 2 3/8. So I'm going to measure out 15/16 of an inch. I'm going to do it again down here. And then I want this to be kind of, even with that. And this is kind of what I meant by you can use almost anything. This is just a piece of paper. I know that's a 90-degree angle, or easily, close enough to that for what we're doing this, or let's try English, or at least close enough to a 90-degree angle to, for what we're doing. And then from that line, I'm just going to measure down, 2 3/8 of an inch. Now, you just have to cut out that square piece, which unfortunately is not quite as easy as, a circular piece. Now to cut this out, you could easily use the cutting disc on a rotary tool. You could drill a hole and just take a keyhole saw, put it in there and cut that out. I'm going back to the oscillating tool. This stuff cuts through the Sintra so easily, and it's easy to control. The only problem I have with this is that it's too, the blade itself is too big. I don't want to butcher this one like I did when we cut out these pieces, where I cut it a small piece of that just so that there were a couple of teeth in there so that I could get in that space. I don't want to damage another one of these blades, so I'm just going to take my time and kind of come in from an angle, and if I have a little bit left over, I can just finish that off with a keyhole saw. Okay, this might get loud. I have this old keyhole saw. Let's see if I can get this to work. Actually, it might be better if I used one that's got a finer tooth blade in here, but we'll see what happens. I think I'm hitting the PVC pipe in there. Yeah, I'm definitely hitting the PVC pipe. Let's see what happens if I just go in there with a little razor knife. It does have like a little serrations on here. We'll see. course, these blades are designed to snap off, so that is definitely going to be a risk. I have to say it's working better than I thought it would. Okay. Yeah, there's what the foam looks like. Considering that was so full that it was coming out of the gaps over here, I can't believe it's collapsed into that. I think I'll definitely use a different foam when I refill this. I think it's safe to say that the big gap filler did not fill a big gap. Now I'm a little bit concerned whether or not this will fit in there with that PVC pipe. I don't know if you can see that or not. You can see that there's a PVC pipe right there. This may not fit. Looks like we're gonna have to get a little bigger. Let's try this. Seems to fit. I think maybe it's a size, it needs to be taller. It's so close, I feel like I should just be able to sand it slightly bigger. Yeah, that did it. However, it looks like that PVC pipe is going to be a problem. It's not going to be a huge problem though, because I've got this. Now I just need to connect those two lines. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to take a small drill bit and I'm going to drill at the bottom in between those two lines. And then I'm going to drill at the top in between those two lines. Now I'm going to take a much larger bit that's big enough to connect the lines. And out it comes. Well, let's see if that'll fit better. I think we're gonna have to refine that just a little bit. We're okay at the bottom, but we're hitting at the top. I was wondering how long it would take for that to happen. Kind of surprised it didn't break, but belt is back on there. Before I do anything else, let's see if that fixed it. No, oh, we did actually. Now, so then we have a tiny bit at the bottom. Just realized I've got this Dremel tool or this rotary tool right here that I can use. It's a very unpleasant noise. Okay. Now we can start wiring things up. Okay, so here's the wires I have from the LED itself. And I'm going to keep the red one in this hole, and I'm going to move this black one over to this hole over here. But I'm going to strip the wires, give myself plenty of wire to work with. And I'm going to do the same thing on the battery connector. Make sure you're not using too small of a hole in your stripper and tearing the actual conductor here. And I have some heat shrink tubing You could also just use electrical tape for this. There's not a, we're not talking about a high voltage or anything. Even though we have a 9-volt battery, we're not going to be using anywhere near that much power. Also have some larger heat shrink tubing that's large enough that it will go over the contacts on this switch. Because we're not actually going to use the connectors that are going to slide onto here. I'm just going to solder the wires directly onto here. Now the reason why I have the red one coming to the switch and the black one coming to the battery is because even though it's theoretically you could use either side, I was always told that best practice is to always put the switch on the hot side. In this case, it doesn't really matter at all, but if you were doing other electronics where there's grounds involved and things like that, you never know if something might short across the ground and connect the circuit if you're using the negative side or the ground side. So you always want to use the hot side. In this case, it doesn't really matter at all, but it's just something I do as a matter of habit. So I'm going to take my small heat shrink tubing, if I can see what I'm doing. I just had this little clamp, a little clip, and I'm going to use it to hold this up away from the actual solder joint that we're going to do. I think I'll take this and put it up there as well. So I have one small and one large heat shrink tubing. Push it way up there, that little clamp on it, and hopefully that stuff will not have shrunk after I make this solder connection and I can slide them back down. Now I have my switch and I'm just going to put this through the little hole that's in there. I'm going to bend it around that and try and twist it back around itself. I folded it over and I'm holding it while I twist this around. So that gives a pretty good connection just by itself. Now I have a soldering iron and I'm going to try and solder this on here. I have this habit that I picked up from jewelry smithing, and that is when you solder something, you put the heat on one side and the solder on the other, and the solder will travel to the heat. I don't think I've ever seen someone who works in electronics do that. It's probably not a good thing, but it's somehow stuck to my head. And whenever I try to not do that, it doesn't seem to work for me. I know people that work with electronics have a tendency to just put solder on the connection and then put the wires in the solder, and that seems to work fine for them. It's definitely a lot faster than the way I do it. My way is very slow. Now I'm looking at my supposed connection here, and it's not twisted at all. Let's see if I can do this better with this. You don't want it to get so tight that you break it. Now if I had any of these connectors that would hook onto this switch, I would just use those. That would be a lot easier. Now I've melted the solder onto there. Use that light source. That looks pretty good. Now let's hope that the solder slides down. Now think about it, I only need the one, but now you can use a heat gun for this, but I'm just going to use this lighter. Try not to set anything on fire. Okay, now that's both insulated and well attached. And I'm going to do it again using the red wire on the battery connector. This one's going to be, I can't twist the switch on this one because I've already got a wire attached to it, so I'm going to have to try and twist the battery connector. Oh, I bet most of you have already noticed that I didn't put the heat shrink on here. I think I am going to go ahead and use both pieces of heat shrink just because I think the added width of this piece will help this piece seal up well. Luckily I don't have to clip it up because gravity will help this time. Try not to melt the heat shrink on the other piece with my soldering iron. Might be safer to go the other way. Let's put the heat on this side. Okay, now this has to go back in. Don't make that mistake. And we need the black wire. We need the black wire from the LED light. We just need to hook these two together. So I'm going to take my little heat shrink wire, or heat shrink tubing, and you want to twist these together. In fact, what I usually do is I'll twist one of them over the other one and then twist it to itself. And then I'll take the other one and twist it over and then around itself. If you just twist them together, you're kind of asking the solder to hold everything together. Whereas if you do it this way, it's actually a very tight connection already, and the solder just sort of cements everything so it doesn't move. Okay, hold on. Time for some helping hands. These are terrible helping hands, but they are what I have, and they are currently doing the job. I think once again I'm going to put the soldering iron on the back, and I'm going to put the solder in the front. Okay, that should be a good connection. Now the heat shrink tubing goes up. Those wires are sticking up. Okay, now I'm pretty sure if I plug that in, it's going to work. Okay, let's open this up, put the contacts in here, and I think I'm going to go ahead and plug this in just so the weight of the battery will hold this down and keep it from going back through. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put super glue on the sides of this and also on the back of this faceplate all the way around on here. Now I'm going to slide this in here and hold it down so that it's flush where I want it to be, and I'll just hold that for about 30 seconds. And I think that's going to be good. I'll go ahead and hit it with a zip kicker. And then later I'll go back and I'll put a screw in here and here. Looks like somehow I got some super glue here. I guess that shouldn't surprise me. Just make sure that it still works. I had to go through all this trouble and then glue this door shut. Okay. Now I need to go find some, put that with the closed circuit. on top. Now I need to go find some expanding foam spray that is not the big gap filler. Okay, I'm a little frantic because I thought I was recording, but I wasn't. What I've done so far is, first of all, I screwed these in here, but you didn't miss anything there. I just took a screwdriver and a little screw like this and just pushed it up against the Centra and screwed it in with a screwdriver. For this, I took a little piece of wood, just a little scrap piece of wood that I've got, and I stuck it in there and measured from the bottom to here, and then I measured using my calipers from the top of this box here to there and subtracted it from the measurement that I made when I stuck the wood down there. And that gave me this size right here. And I'm just gonna shove this, maybe I'll hot glue it. I just want this to be a little bit of security to keep this button from pushing through. So I'm gonna put some hot glue on here. I'm gonna stick this in between the two wires. This is going to be a mess, I can tell you right now. And then I sprayed some of the spray foam just in the very back, but it has expanded very rapidly. I didn't spray it anywhere near the opening, it just down in here, but it has expanded quite a bit. So I'm going to put some hot glue where I can on this. The foam has gotten in the way there. That's going to be a problem. So I'm going to put it around here. I'm going to spray some more foam into here. And then I'm going to push this into place the way I want it to be. And kind of hold it flat. And hopefully the hot glue will cool faster than the spray foam will push it out of the hole. Between the hot glue and the spray foam, I am sticky. Make sure this still works. Yep. Okay, I'll wait for that all to cool off and cure, and then we'll take a look and see what this all looks like, if it was a success or a failure. And now that we're not in as much of a rush, what I did is I just pushed this into the hole until it bottomed out, and then I, using this as a guide, sort of this ledge here, I just marked onto this wooden piece here the height, or the depth of the inside of the jetpack. And then I measured from the top of this lid opening to the furthest part of the switch base, and then subtracted that from the overall length of the original measurement. And hopefully that's not too long. The problem, if it's too long, the problem is it's going to push the switch out through the opening in this lid. But I think it's okay. We'll take a look at it in about 30 minutes. One quick thing, I remembered there are holes in the top and bottom of this, so I went ahead and took the battery out. I'm not too worried about this because once it totally cures, I'll be able to just easily break all that foam out of there and I'll have plenty of room. I can also easily peel all that off of the contacts on the battery connector. But we'll take a look at this later.
Well, I guess I should have taped those holes off or something. It definitely expanded into the battery box, but it shouldn't be that hard to clean up. I gotta tell you, it was really hard not to try to clean this up last night, but cleaning up still expanding spray foam is futile, for one thing, because it just keeps expanding into the space, and also miserably sticky and you can't get the stuff off your hands. But if you wait for it to dry, you can just peel it out. The hard part's going to be peeling it out without removing the wires. And I guess I could have just left it hollow. Main thing I was wanting was I wanted this to have something backing it, you know, so that it wasn't just having the hot glue on the edge holding it in place. I wanted there to be something behind this as well, and I guess that piece of wood that I put in there would be plenty for that. So you don't really need to have the foam. You need to be careful around these wires. Okay, I think I'm going to have to take this away so I can be able to see in a little better detail so I don't break the wires. But I'll clean this out and I'll be right back. So everything's cleaned up now for the test to see if I damage any of the wires. I still need a little bit of cleanup to do out here on the outside of it. But yep, we're good. Now we can go ahead and attach this, and I think I probably should have attached this before I did the wiring, just because I could have gotten, I can't pull this out anymore because the LED doesn't have room for it. So I really could have put a lot of hot glue in there and pushed it through, and it would have a really great seal. I don't really have that option anymore. But since I can't just put a ton of hot glue in that hole and everything, I think I'm going to do a combination of hot glue and super glue. I'm going to put a little bit of hot glue, try to fill in that little gap that's there where I made the hole just a tiny bit too big. And then I'm going to put gel super glue around this, around the whole thing, and then push it down. And I don't know how successful this is going to be, because I can't see what I'm doing. In fact, I totally missed the gap there. Okay, it looks like I'm using hot glue on this part. Because I've gotten hot glue everywhere and none of it where it's supposed to be. Yep, definitely got ahead of myself. I should have glued this on first and then run the wires through there down to the bottom. I think I was distracted by the fact that there was no foam when I cut the back out. And this, I think, is probably better to use hot glue. See how this LED is kind of sticking up? I want to get it flush down. You know, it's sticking up here. I want it to be flushed down here like that. That's going to interfere with the lid, I'm afraid. I think I've got no choice now than to go ahead and put the top on. Yeah, probably should use super glue on this as well. This has become how mistakes don't necessarily mess things up. I think I want the open parts to be facing forward and to the sides, like that. I'm going to turn it on so I can see what it looks like. Yeah, that looks good. I'm happy with that. Well, since I went with the pre-made beacon, I think using this would be, you know, wrong. For fairness, let's go ahead and do it the one that I made from parts. And obviously, if you're going to go with this, all you have to do is put some glue down and glue that in place, and you're done. But since we did actually drill the hole here already, let's go ahead and do this. Plus, you can see how I would have put the beacon in if I had put it in before I wired it. So basically, I'm going to take some of this hot glue, and I'm going to put it down in the hole. A lot of it's going to run out, obviously, but hopefully I get enough on the sides. Now I'm going to take this 1.5 inch
long, which is 38 millimeters piece. And what I did earlier is I put the socket cap screw in here, and I measured from the top of the cap screw down 1 and 11/32, which is exactly 34 millimeters. And you make a mark right there. And that's going to tell me how deep this goes in. Okay. I almost waited too long on that. Now I've got my washers. And I'm going to, once again, just put some glue. I don't want to get it on the upper part of the tube. Now suddenly it is not wanting to slide. It's been sliding freely this whole time, and now it wants to be stubborn. I swear, as soon as you start trying to film something, everything becomes way more difficult. Okay, and I'm going to take a little bit of my thin CA glue, and I'm just going to run it on there just because I'm a little bit worried about, because the hot glue was so cooled off when I tried to put this in there. I'm a little bit worried that it might not stay very well, so I'm going to put a little bit of that thin CA glue. It'll, capillary effect will pull it in there. Okay, I've just got some of this, and hopefully it will flow in there. And I can go ahead and use that for my second washer. That at least slid the way it should. Now I'm going to go back with the hot glue, and I'm just going to put a fair amount of hot glue into here. Now obviously if we had clogged up the other end of this, then the glue wouldn't run out, but I don't want there to be a huge amount of glue. And we're just going to drop this into the hot glue. Yeah, actually if I had clogged the bottom, I think all that glue would have poured out and would have been kind of a nightmare. So don't seal the other end of your tube. And then just using my hands, I'm making sure that everything is centered. You can kind of feel if it's off to one side. Okay, and hopefully when I set these next to each other, they'll be roughly the same size. They look good. Okay, I was going to go ahead and go on and do a couple of things on here just to get things all tidied up before we start getting it ready for paint, but I am trying to make shorter videos and that, you know, they come out more often, so I think this is probably a good place to stop. These are the last two things that go on here. Everything else is already on there or has been made and will go on at the last minute after we start painting or after we actually paint them. Now, there are still a couple of things we have to do to this before we can paint it, but we'll do that in the next video. As always, if you liked this video or thought it was helpful, you know, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe so you don't miss any other videos. And most importantly, if you're still watching this at this point, please leave a comment, even if it's just to say hi. It'll help so much for the channel. The more these videos get interacted with, the more it gets shared with other people, and the more my subscribers can grow. Not to mention that it's really the comments that keep me going, so if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them down below and I will answer them as soon as possible. But with that in mind, I'll see you next time. Thanks.